各位觀眾大家好，歡迎收睇26分鐘見證實錄之與黨領對話。2024年卑詩省選將會喺2024年嘅10月19號舉行，咁各政黨嘅競選活動正係進行得如火如荼。我哋喺一連2集嘅節目之中分別邀請到卑詩省3個主要政黨嘅黨領進行專訪。喺今集嘅第一部分，我哋首先就去了解一下卑詩保守黨嘅黨領 Webster 羅士德對於目前本省面臨嘅一系列問題嘅睇法。Mr. Webster， 首先歡迎你今日嚟到我哋電視台接受我哋嘅專訪。
So first of all, thank you very much for having me on. It's much appreciated.
咁首先我哋傾一傾住屋同埋負擔能力方面嘅問題啊。對於卑詩省嘅住屋負擔能力危機，你有啲乜嘢具體嘅計劃啊
？So the taxation is only one side that helps to bring down the costs from government. We need also to make sure that we improve our economy so that we can see higher wages. Wage growth needs to be much higher in this province to be able to help with affordability. And then, of course, the other issue is on housing, where you actually have to have housing to be able to buy or to be able to rent, and we do not have enough stock that has been built. So there's a lot that needs to be done to drive investment in that. So we need to work with municipalities. We need to drive all of the time delay problems, the cost structure out of the housing. We need to work with municipalities to do pre-zoning and drive out some of those cost structures and some of that time delay there. And we need to be able to come in and support municipalities with money for things like water and sewer upgrades that are desperately needed within communities.
咁你對於卑詩新民主黨黨領尹大維宣布如果聯邦政府取消消費者碳稅嘅要求，咁卑詩新民主黨亦都將會取消消費者碳稅。對於呢方面你有啲咩回應啊？你又會點樣區分你政黨同埋卑詩新民主黨喺呢一方面嘅立場呢？
As the Conservative Party of British Columbia, our plan is to scrap the entire carbon tax. It needs to go. Taxing people into poverty will not change the weather. And so that's a commitment. You'll see it in our first budget in terms of it being removed in British Columbia. What David Eby is proposing to do is to get rid of the consumer side, but then he plans to double or more the cost on the business side. And what that means is, for example, for trucking, everything that's brought in is going to cost more for you as a consumer. On agriculture, everything that's grown is going to cost more. On forestry, everything that's produced is going to be cost more. Everything that is done on the corporate side ends up getting passed on to the consumers. So he's not really getting rid of the carbon tax. All he's doing is hiding it. And in my opinion, that's weak leadership. You need to be able to be bold and say what your directions are, what you're trying to do, and be straight up with people, as opposed to, this approach that the NDP is taking.
對於推動卑詩省嘅醫療改革方面你有啲乜嘢計劃啊？
We're actually going to expand funding on healthcare because as we move to this new model of healthcare, and we have the courage to say what we have is not working. As we move to that new model, we're actually going to need to expand healthcare funding to be able to deal with the backlog of their wait times that are in place, to be able to put the new structure in place, to be able to clean up process. We need to remove the bureaucratic process in place and get these professionals working on the front line delivering services for people. So David Eby likes to make up things and lie, quite frankly, and he's done that on many issues about the Conservative Party. I understand why he does it, because with his weak leadership, he cannot defend the policies and approaches he's doing, so he is just trying to scare people as opposed to actually debating and discussing the real issues that are happening for us in British Columbia.
咁除咗治療之外你覺得造成僻癮同埋精神健康方面有問題嘅根本原因係乜嘢？你又有啲咩嘅解決方案呢？
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stop David Eby from building drug dens in the middle of communities, particularly in places like Richmond. I mean, that's just got to come to an end. It's ridiculous. Safe supply and decriminalization are failures. Experts are telling me that we have the highest level of addicts per capita anywhere in North America. And so it's just a symptom of the failure of this approach. Decriminalization has taken tools away from police, from being able to have a civil society. Decriminalization has to go. Safe supply is not safe. It is very dangerous. And the drugs are very dangerous. And what's happening today is an addict will go to a drugstore, they'll pick up the safe supply, they'll go to the dealer, they'll swap the safe supply for the hard street drugs that they want. And then the dealer now has these drugs, and they go into our schools and say, I have safe supply for you. Would you like to buy some safe supply? It's not safe. This is dangerous drugs. And so we'll bring an end to both of those types of approaches. But we need to build out that regimen of treatment for people, which is everything from doctor-prescribed treatment to short-term treatment recovery to longer-term recovery for people that get over the addictions but also need help with life skills to be able to fully be able to incorporate back into society again. So that combined with the longer-term care and treatment is a full regiment of what needs to be done to be able to bring an end to addictions.
咁可唔可以解釋一下俾大家聽，你嘅公共安全政策將點樣可以能夠解決我哋目前嘅犯罪問題啊？點樣可以令到大家咧喺走上街上面都覺得安全啊？
First of all, we need to be able to invest and support our police. That's a big piece of what needs to be done. But where we have these prolific offenders, 20% of the people are committing 80% of the crimes. There needs to be consequences for people who commit crimes. And so we're going to be pushing for guaranteed minimum sentencing from the federal government so that these people, there is consequences for people doing these crimes, particularly for these prolific offenders. We're also going to make sure that we work and expand our court system with our judges and sheriffs and the whole side of things so that we actually create a separate process for dealing with minor crimes so that they can get put through the system much faster. So they don't have to wait 18 months to go through and they're out on the street just committing more crimes. The last piece we need to do, which is very significant, is when we have these prolific violent offenders. We'll actually use the Mental Health Act. We'll actually say if somebody is at risk of harming themselves or others, they can be held and treated until they're no longer a risk. And it's something that we'll do as British Columbians because we need to make sure our streets are safe.
你早前提出啦，要對教育方面嘅素材進行全面嘅審查，咁你會用啲乜嘢嘅標準嚟到評估課程內容咧？咁你計劃點樣去平衡家長嘅權利同埋唔同主題嘅綜合教育需求啊？
So I think the key in my mind there is our education system needs to be teaching kids how to think and how to think critically. It shouldn't be about teaching kids what to think. And so all the material that's being available in our schools needs to be looked at through that lens. And we'll do the review of all material that's used for teaching in our schools to make sure that we have that critical ability for kids to be able to learn and be able to be successful when they come out of their schools. There's another issue, which of course is the SOGI program. And SOGI is sexual identity, the sexualization of kids in our schools. There's material in there which you couldn't put display on television because it's pornography. There's material that we read in the legislature and we're called out for reading at the legislature because it's unparliamentary. I don't believe that sort of material should be available to our children. Another important piece of that, though, is we want to make sure all children are safe in our school. So you have to have a very strong anti-bullying program in place. You've got to make sure that racism and hate have no place in our school system. And we also need to make sure that there's support in place because many children who are struggling with their identity, with who they are, may need those supports and it may need to extend to families. So those are the types of things that will change in terms of our education system.
如果你當選咧，你有啲乜嘢計劃咧，去改善我哋嘅營商環境啊？
Really, when you look at it, the biggest challenge we have is people do not want to be able to invest in British Columbia because they find it just too difficult. If it takes 3 months to build a warehouse south of the border, it can take 2 to 3 years to build one in British Columbia. And that's just because of process and which drives up cost, making it very, very difficult. So we need to do everything we can to remove these government regulations, these barriers, this red tape, so that businesses can be able to be successful in British Columbia. Along with that, we've got to make sure we've got a competitive tax regime. But at the end of the day, small business can't be successful unless it has people who come and use the business. How can you operate in this province when these things are going on? So having safety, having addressing the drug issues is a big piece of businesses being able to be successful. Cutting out the costs and red tape is a big piece of it. And then making sure that government has the lightest touch possible. And all of that is so that companies can be successful so that they can pay better wages. Because at the end of the day, if people can't afford to live here, they don't have employees, they don't have people that are visiting their businesses. So all of this is tied in together in terms of improving the business environment for small business in British Columbia.
馮宜幹早前咧決定終止卑詩聯合黨嘅競選工作啦，形成咗一個非常特殊嘅局面。呢啲都係我哋以前喺卑詩嘅政治之中咧未見過㗎。一啲觀察家就表示啊，現時啊中間偏右嘅選民可能會感到失去政治依歸。咁對於呢方面嘅憂慮，你點樣回應啊？
Well, it's actually interesting because I think, quite frankly, the Conservative Party has built a broader coalition than the BC Liberals ever were. The word conservative has something, and it's why I say it's not about being conservative or liberal or NDP or Green for that matter. It's just about standing for what's right, fighting for the average everyday person, and getting back to just common sense in government.
唔少嘅省議員宣布以獨立人士嘅身份咧參選競逐連任㗎。你認為呢一種情況對你嘅政黨嚟講咧係一種挑戰啦，定係機遇咧？特別係如果我哋真係出現少數黨政府嘅話。
Having said that, Kevin Falcon stepped down and decided to suspend his campaign because he wanted to do what's right. We have very weak leadership in David Eby. He's a hardcore socialist. He's an authoritarian, and the policies he has done in this province are very, very destructive. You can look at the crisis in any component of our government, any component of our society for evidence of what he is doing. Kevin Falcon saw this and said, no, we need to be able to bring an end to what David Eby is doing. So he took the brave move of suspending his campaign and coming in and supporting us. And I thank him for that move. And what we've seen from a number of people, a number of the former MLAs, is they've decided to run as independents. And so clearly, they don't share that same value that Kevin Falcon and I shared, which is that we need to bring an end to David Eby and these destructive policies, and we need to be able to get our province back on track.
如果你當選，你將會為卑詩省民首先做嘅3件事係乜嘢呢？
For the top 3 things that we need to do, obviously tax reform, getting rid of the carbon tax is a big piece that we need to do. We've got to end the drug dens. We've got to make sure that our streets are safe and we deal with this addiction crisis. And quite frankly, we need to make sure that we take every measure we can to drive down the cost of living and affordability for both our housing and just for the day-to-day expenses so that people can be able to see a future in British Columbia.
Mr. Webster， 今日再次多謝你接受我哋嘅專訪啊！
Thank you very much for having me on. I very much appreciated it.
了解過卑詩保守黨黨領 John Webster 羅士德對於各競選議題嘅立場之後，下一節翻嚟，我哋輪到聽聽卑詩綠黨黨領 Sonia Firstnell 嘅政綱方向。歡迎翻到嚟26分鐘見證實錄之與黨領對話。卑詩綠黨喺今次嘅競選之中，不斷推出新嘅政綱，試圖獲得更多選民嘅支持。咁卑詩綠黨黨領 Sonia Firstnell 喺今次嘅大選嘅優先事項係啲乜嘢呢？係咪會為該黨帶嚟咗新嘅動力呢？ Sonia 你好啊，首先咧多謝你今日接受我哋嘅訪問啊。
Yeah, thank you so much.
咁卑詩綠黨喺今次嘅選舉之中就提議啊，要喺全省嘅範圍之內咧實施免費公共交通服務，咁並且咧係顯著咁擴大服務㗎。你認為呢一個計劃嘅可行性有幾大啊？
We wouldn't propose it if we didn't think it was feasible. So right now, our Ministry of Transportation budget goes primarily towards cars and vehicles. But if we change the amount that we're investing into transit, so it's $800 per capita versus $215 for transit, if we just shifted those a little bit, we could actually have really high quality and free transit. And the benefit of that is people can get to work, we have less congestion, we reduce our emissions, we have young people that can get to school. It's a way to get people moving, literally, and it's a way to reduce the congestion that we see. It's a solution that I think we really need in BC.
咁卑詩綠黨就提出啦，要引入呢一個嘅普及學校食品計劃，加強心理健康嘅支援，同埋提供咧呢一個嘅科技設備俾學童㗎。咁你認為啊，咁樣點樣可以咧改善到卑詩省教育系統之中不平等嘅現象呢？
Universal school food. We have programs that are really successful right now in Cowichan, Nourish Cowichan, run by an old friend of mine, Fatima De Silva. She's feeding 1,500 kids a day. Healthy, local food, high nutrition, high quality. And she's doing it with very limited funds. So we have examples of programs that work. Let's have a government that works with communities and ensures that in a universal school food program, we're not only making sure that every child has healthy food every day, but that we're supporting local farmers, the local economy, that we're strengthening our food security this way. When it comes to school counselors and psychologists, this is one way that we address the growing problem we're seeing with mental health and wellness. And having access for kids to those supports when they need them is so important. We know how important it is for kids to have a number of trusted adults in their lives. So let's make our schools a place where healthy food, trusted adults, supports for mental health, well-being are all there. For the technology, we've got the cell phone ban, which I think is a good step. But for a lot of kids, the cell phone is the only technology they have for doing their school assignments. So for grade 6, let's make sure every child has a laptop that stays at school and they can do their work and learn to be literate, digital literacy. I just saw something about kids not learning how to type now, and that's a really important skill. For grade 10s, another round of laptops, but this one they can go home. We don't get equity if some kids have access to the technology that they need because their families can afford it, and some kids don't. A universal approach to public education says all kids get the same tools to start with. Imagine in the 70s or the 80s if only some kids could have textbooks or notebooks. That wouldn't be fair. And right now, a laptop is a very essential part of learning for kids.
咁卑斯綠黨咧就推出咗話想實行呢一個嘅 Dogwood model 啊，以改革呢一個嘅醫療基礎設施服務㗎。咁你可唔可以介紹一下，其實呢一個模式咧嘅內容同埋目標係乜嘢咧？
Yeah, the Dogwood model is community health centers in every community. It's a public primary healthcare system. So wherever you live, you can be assured that you have access to primary care. Primary care is the backbone, the foundation of a healthcare system, and with hundreds of thousands of people without primary care right now, they're using hospitals for accessing healthcare, and that is very expensive. It's also very expensive to wait until people are in a health crisis before they're getting care. So team-based cares, doctors, nurse practitioners, nurses, psychologists, social workers, allied health professionals, all working together as a team to provide health care to their communities. And when you go to a community health center, whatever your health needs are, you're in the right place. This is a model that's been proven to work. We have 30 in BC right now. But what we would do is invest to make sure that there's another 93 immediately, and then build on that model so that doctors aren't having to run a small business. They aren't burdened with the paperwork and the bureaucracy, and they're able to do what they're trained to do, which is deliver high-quality health care to their patients.
你曾經批評啊卑斯保守黨黨領對於氣候科學嘅評論啦，咁你亦都對於卑斯新民主黨發展液化天然氣產業咧表示擔憂㗎。咁其實綠黨喺呢一方面啊有啲乜嘢嘅政策方向咧
Let's get to a place in BC where we have clean energy infrastructure, and the inputs into our energy system are coming from the sun, from the wind, from tide, from geothermal. Once we've got that infrastructure, we have an abundant and inexpensive source of energy for British Columbia. If we can use that extraordinary amount of energy to then fuel our economy in innovation, in technology, if we keep subsidizing the LNG industry the way that the BC NDP have, and the way that the Conservatives want to continue doing, we lose the opportunity to be leaders in the world on the transformation of our energy, but we also lose the opportunity of using energy here in BC to fuel a whole new powerhouse economy for our province. Why are we continuing to allow the oil and gas industry to get profits out of British Columbians when they have to pay for energy, when we could be producing clean, renewable, truly affordable energy right here?
咁卑斯保守黨同埋卑斯新民主黨啊，都已經提出咗，如果聯邦政府咧取消要求，佢哋咧係會取消呢一個嘅消費者碳稅㗎。喺呢一方面啊，你係有啲乜嘢嘅立場啊
This is so backwards looking. We need to keep that price on pollution because it's a signal to industry, it's a signal to our economy that we want to move away from dirty fossil fuels. We want to move to clean energy and an economy that actually doesn't leave people behind and doesn't create this boom and bust cycle that we are always in BC. So I'm disappointed in both of the parties that they've taken this stance. It also takes $1,000 out of the pockets of families in BC who are getting the rebate from the carbon tax. This is the one tax that is being given back to people, and it's astonishing to me that this is the tax that they want to take away. It is helping people with affordability.
卑詩聯合黨早前就宣布決定咧終止呢一個嘅競選活動啊。你提到卑詩省目前嘅政治局面咧就變得收窄咗㗎。其實啦，對於你哋綠黨選舉嘅方向同埋策略方面有啲乜嘢影響呢？
I think we're here to make a very strong case to British Columbia that we need a third voice in the BC legislature. We need a party like the BC Greens that are focused on solution, on evidence, on making things better for British Columbians. And when we have two parties that spend their time just fighting with each other and pointing at each other and wanting to blame each other for everything, it's exhausting for the people of BC. People of BC need us to focus on how do we solve the problems, how do we best serve BC, how do we put people first, and that's what the BC Greens have done for the last 7 years, and we will continue to do that. We need to move past this two-party system that does not produce good outcomes for the people of BC.
卑詩綠黨咧原本喺省議會有2席啊，你有幾大嘅信心今次咧省選之後能夠增加多啲嘅議席？同埋如果我哋真係出現一個少數黨政府，你會唔會咧同任何一個黨合作？
I'm confident that we are going to elect a group of very strong candidates. When I look at the ridings around the Salish Sea, so in Victoria and Saanich, Cowichan, Courtenay Comox, Sunshine Coast, West Van Sky, it's like a green life raft for the province. We're going to take care of things. And then we have a really strong candidate out in Kootenay Central, Nicole Charlwood. So I know what it takes to get elected as a Green. It's an enormous amount of hard work, which guarantees that you're going to have a hard-working MLA and representative if you elect a Green. I hope we have a minority, because that is a government that has to pay attention to British Columbia, has to work with the other parties.
卑詩綠黨啊，提議將投票年齡降低至16歲。其實你哋點解會有呢一方面嘅提議呢？
We see from countries that have implemented a 16-year-old vote. Scotland recently did this. One, when young people vote when they're still in school, they get that extra education around how to be an informed voter, how to understand platforms, what is it the political parties are offering. They become informed voters. That's really important. Two, when people vote in their first election when they're young, they tend to become lifelong voters. We want lifelong voters here in BC. Our last election only had a 50% voter turnout. 1 in 2 people did not vote. And that's a weakening of our democracy. So having the voting age lowered to 16, having it combined with education around civics and civic responsibility in our electoral system and how to be an informed voter, this is a real benefit to our democracy and to our society. And it's really important to engage young people in that vision for the future, but also it's their future most of all. And so they should be participating. Let's pull them into our democratic system and make them feel proud and excited to be part of our democracy.
如果你當選啊，頭3件最重要嘅事情，你會做啲乜嘢啊？
I would say housing, healthcare, and climate, and all 3 of these are very connected to affordability and cost of living. If we act on affordable housing, if we ensure that the healthcare system is working for people, and we respond to climate in a way that moves our economy to clean energy and protects people and communities, we are saving people money now and in the long term. So these are our priorities.
今日再次多謝你接受我哋嘅專訪啊！
Okay, thank you so much.
好啦，今集嘅節目時間差唔多啦。咁如果觀眾對我哋嘅節目有啲乜嘢意見嘅話，係好歡迎大家以電郵嘅方式同我哋聯絡㗎。我哋嘅電郵地址係mag26@fairchildtv.com。如果觀眾想上網重溫今集嘅節目，亦都可以上到去我哋嘅網站3w.fairchildtv.com， 點擊節目重溫一欄就可以睇得返㗎啦。下星期會繼續有26分鐘見證實錄之與黨領對話。